I've got a Case 970 diesel tractor that I'm going to change the oil on. I got it cheap at a farm auction and have been using it for a few years, and it's time to do some maintenance on it. I primarily use it for running an auger to fill a grain bin, or in this instance, I'm going to sell some grain and we'll be using it to load a semi. Before I start it, I'm going to check the oil to make certain that it has the correct amount and to ensure that the engine does not get ruined from a low oil condition. Now I'm going to check the radiator coolant to ensure that the correct amount is in there to prevent the engine from getting too hot while I'm warming it up to get it ready for the service. Don't mind the seat needs refurbished, but I'm getting ready to start it. I'm turning the key in the opposite direction to turn the glow plugs on to preheat the engine. It's a little cold. Start it up. The beeping is a alarm that I installed for the brake to ensure that I don't drive off with the parking brake installed. I'm looking at the oil pressure to make certain that the pressure gauge starts to show some movement. There we're at 60 psi, which is good. Got 14 and a half volts on a gauge that I installed. It's got 9,200 hours, which is a lot, but it's still ticking away. Went to the barn to make a place, and here a critter has dug a hole trying to get out of the barn. I don't know how it got in, but unfortunately, it's made a big mess, and I've got to clean that up. Here I'm opening up the big door to the barn. It can be tricky since the wind can take the door, so I want to make certain that I get it open in a timely manner. On this day, it's not particularly windy, so it's not a big deal. The payloader's in the way. It's what I use to move snow. I'm checking the oil in it. That engine is an oil-cooled engine, so there's no antifreeze, which is interesting. Giving it a little walk around, looking at these chains I'm admiring. I got those at a farm auction cheap and cut them down so they fit. They originally went to a small utility tractor, and I cut them shorter so they fit. They're not perfect, but they made a world of difference on this machine. I got the loader out of the barn and it's warming up. I'm sweeping the floor. This barn used to be an old cattle shed where my dad would milk cows. So if you notice the gravel in the foreground is where the free stalls used to be, where the cows would lay down and rest. And I'm sweeping the cement where the cows would walk. And there's big grooves in the cement that made it so the cows had good traction with their feet. But it proves to be very difficult when working on machines to contend with those grooves, and the floor is sloped, which makes things interesting. Interesting story on that leaf blower is I found it laying on the side of the road. I don't know what happened. It was pretty beat up, but it was leaking fuel all over the place. A little bit of work and it came to life, and I've been using it for quite a while. So I was pretty happy to find something like that on the side of the road. It doesn't always work to run the leaf blower in the barn because the wind has to be in the right direction to get that dust out of the barn. The grooves in the cement really causes a lot of problems with debris getting in there, and when I'm cleaning, it gets stuck in there, so I have to really work hard at getting the grooves cleaned out, and I don't get it all out, obviously, but it's nice to get most of it out when I can. The ceiling wasn't always visible. There used to be a second floor on this barn, and I cut it out so that I could pull the combine in, and it has made a huge difference on being able to work on the combine inside the barn. In the past, I used to have to work on it outside in the weather, and it got pretty bad when it was cold, and my fingers would get cold. So just having the machine inside the building made a world of difference. So I'm really happy to have a space like this to use. One thing I did find after getting the combine in there that it was really dark. I had gotten those overhead lights pretty cheap used and was able to string them up. One thing I had to deal with was being able to get up that high, and ultimately I figured out I could put some planks on top of the grain tank of the combine and stand on those planks on top of the combine. This allowed me to reach up high and be able to install the electrical wires and mount the lights in the right spots. It really made a big difference on being able to see what I was doing. It's still pretty darn dark in there, when you're working on a machine. So I've got some portable lights that I will bring in and shine them on a particular project that I'm working on, and that makes it so I can see what I'm doing. Now that I've got the barn cleaned out and ready for the tractor to pull in, I'm going to put the payloader away since it is now warmed up. I've got a lean-to on the side of the barn that I park equipment under, and it's always nice to have it underneath of a roof. Pulling into the barn, I like to back in, and there's a slight incline, so it makes things a little bit tricky coming up the incline. So I got to get a little bit of a run for it. And then squeezing the machine into a tight place where visibility can be pretty low, and I don't want to run into anything, so I try to take it easy and go slow, and I do a lot of looking around to make certain that I don't run into anything. Of course, I seem to have neglected cleaning out the auger before I put it away last fall, so it's got some pretty nasty stuff in there. It's corn left over from harvest. I'm always a little freaked out sticking my hands up and stuff like that because you don't know what's in there. Granted, before I made the video, I ran the auger so that if there was anything, it got ran out. But I watched a video from a YouTuber called Cole the Corn Star, and he was cleaning up junk and had an auger with a unbelievable amount of rats that came out. So every time I get my hands around an auger like this, I always think there's going to be rats jumping out. Granted, I think I've only seen a rat on the farm maybe twice or three times in my life. Now I'm ready to unhook the auger from the tractor. I unhooked the hoses from the swing auger, it's ran hydraulically. And then the third hose is to raise and lower the auger. The jack is cantankerous. I have to jiggle it and pull pretty hard on the pin to get the jack to release. And that will raise it up off of the hitch of the tractor so I can get it unhooked. I got this auger really cheap at a farm auction, and I'm really grateful to have it. I've used it a lot, and it's my primary auger now. Granted, it's old and cantankerous and has a few issues of its own, but it served me well. This PTO shaft that I'm trying to take off here, I actually had taken it apart over the winter and cleaned it, thinking that everything was going to be great, but I couldn't get it, and I had to go get some tools and pry on it. And after a lot of issues, I got it taken apart, as you can see here. Now I'm getting on the tractor to pull it away from the auger. I'm always looking to make certain that I didn't leave anything hooked up because I don't want to rip anything apart on the way. The tractor was parked for a long time, so the brakes were stuck slightly, but they popped loose with no issues. Now I'm ready to take the tractor for a drive to warm it up. It's a little muddy, so I decided I'd take it out on the gravel road to warm it up rather than taking it out in the fields where I could tear up the grass from being too wet. This transmission is a power shift, and it really has a big jerk to it when you shift from one gear to the other, and that's why the camera's shaking so much. It's fun to see the sheep running as I drive down the road. Getting back up the hill, I could feel the clutch slipping a little bit, which is a sign that this tractor's seen better days. But for being an auger tractor, I guess it really doesn't matter that the clutch is slipping. It seems to be treating me well. I'm eyeing my path that I need to go to back into the barn here, so I'm always taking it easy, trying to make certain I don't run into anything. This tractor isn't the best for being in tight places with, but I'm pretty concerned about running over that leaf blower, so I stopped it just in time. Draining the transmission oil can be pretty tricky because these 5-gallon buckets get heavy and it holds more than 5 gallons, so you have to swap one bucket for the next. And I always try to do it without making a big mess, but it never seems to fail. I make a big mess. But in this instance, I was able to switch buckets cleanly with a quick action, making it go pretty good. Pick the other bucket out of the way with my foot. Looking at that oil, it's got some discoloration to it. These tractors are known for getting moisture in them. I'll turn the electrical switch on for the air compressor. Go into the old milk house and turn the air valve on for the air compressor. It's all new, so it's really stiff and I didn't know which way to turn it. Grab my air chuck and the air hose. And I can go top off some tires. The front tires seem to leak a little bit of air over the year, so I'll just top them off and they'll be good for another year. Here's another place that I have a tendency to make big messes is with the 55-gallon drum for my used oil. I noticed that even after sweeping and using the leaf blower on the floor, I still got pretty dirty, although the black coat has a tendency to show the dirt. I'm always surprised how heavy these buckets get when you're standing there holding them trying to pour into a specific spot without making any mess. So I think that after you're all done dumping, in this case, 4 buckets of oil, it's pretty exhausting. Here's a different view of pouring oil into the 55-gallon drum. This is engine oil this time from the Case 970 tractor. Looking at it here, I realize I need to get a bigger funnel. I like this one because it's got a large spout and I can dump a fair amount of oil out quickly. The other funnels have a more narrow spout and it takes longer, and then I'm stuck there lifting the bucket longer. Now that I've got the fluids changed on the tractor, I've got this power broom from a lawnmower that I welded up and hooked up to the tractor, and I use it for removing gravel from the grass from moving snow. If you like what you've seen here, hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel out.